Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for our next session. We've got a fantastic session with Mary Holland and Ronan Conlon, Global Payroll Reporting and Insights. What story does your payroll tell? So Mary, I know you know a lot of people on the session today, and we look forward to watching it. So over to you.
Okay, thanks Melanie. So first of all, on our agenda, we're going to talk up a little bit about global reporting, why it's important for you, some benefits, and I have Ronan here that is going to share his story, how he is using reporting in his organization to profile his work that he's doing in the global payroll space and be a strategic leader in the organization to support their business. So we'll be on to Ronan in a few minutes. So of course, I think it's obvious when we think about global reporting why. It's very important for us to be able to explain what we're doing and provide the information. If I look at payroll, I think payroll is a wealth of knowledge. We have a pot of gold in our organization, and how are we sharing that information with our management, our C-suite? All of that information helps our organizations make important decisions on where to hire people, where to spend money, the cost of benefits. So it's all very important that we do global reporting. And when we think about that globally, we want to make sure that we can do reporting at the global level all the way down to the micro level. And of course, what that does, we don't have one currency around the world. Do we have the ability to manipulate that data or change that data with different exchange rates and bring it maybe just to euros, maybe bring it all to USD, whatever currency that you need to have that reporting in, especially important if you have a fluctuation in a country's exchange rate. So that impacts. When we look at reporting, we're telling our story. We're telling what payroll does each and every day. You as payroll professionals are very passionate about the work you do. You are essential workers in your organization, and you need to take the information that you have to share it out in your organization. We know exactly how many people are in an organization, what departments they're in, who they support. We have information that finance needs to make key decisions on the business of the company. Moving over to the operations side, how many hours are employees working overtime? What's that cost to the business? Would it be better to hire an employee? You have that information at your fingertips to share. We just had a great session on Social Security and the pieces of global mobility. So that who's moving where, what countries they're in. The cost of expats is about 3 times the annual salary. So that information is key to a business owner if they're going to send somebody on an expat assignment. I think we talked earlier in the first session of the importance on compliance. Compliance is important. We need to know that. That is what payroll's key guiding factor is, the compliance and the employee experience. So making sure that we know what we're reporting, when we're reporting. And I always want to think about, are we audit ready? So if an auditor comes in today, are we able to meet those requirements and have them at our fingertips? And of course, when we look around the world, there's many different benefit packages. What's the cost of benefits? And each country has a different view and take on, is that taxable or non-taxable? So it's important to share that information. Is the employer contributing to those benefits? What is that actual cost to the pension program they're contributing into our employees? So all of these reports that we have at our fingertips and the data, we're able to achieve operation efficiency for our organizations. So we are a key driver. We should have a seat at the table. And if we don't have that seat, don't ask to have that seat. Take the seat and start sharing your reports. So making it a reality for your organization, look at what's happening currently. What reports do you have in your organization currently? Are leaders asking for information? Do you have the ability to produce those reports? Start to look at some of the reporting tools and what other vendors have. So a question was mentioned today about your vendor relationship in the first session. Ask your vendor what reporting is available. Rory mentioned that information should be able to come out instantaneously, real time. That is a requirement. So what's going on today? Are you waiting days for a report? What do you need? Talk to your vendor and communicate your needs. Look at what other vendors are providing. So it's important, even if you are with a particular provider, to see what other providers are doing. how do you benchmark against other providers to make sure that you're getting the state-of-the-art reporting requirements that you have? And then look at what your stakeholders actually need. Are you meeting their needs and supporting them? The next slide just didn't move, but we can. Got locked in one, but we'll just move on to. Sorry about that. We'll move into the last slide, which is benefits. Before I bring on Ronan to kind of share his story with us. So, of course, I think we all understand the importance of the benefits to the organization and the benefits to us. So making sure that you're thinking about the reporting you need, make this a priority and a strategic goal for yourself. Look at what you have, make sure you communicate to your leaders and stakeholders to see what they're doing, and look at what's actually happening today in your organization. So let's jump right back in and let's look and talk to Ronan about what's going on today in his organization.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. So, so I suppose just as an aside, so I suppose AMCS, we're an industry-specific software provider for the waste and recycling sector. I suppose we've had a huge amount of growth in the last couple of years, which has added to the complexity of our payrolls. I suppose at the moment we've payrolls in 12 different countries across 3 continents, and we've some contractors in a few other continents. I think we cover 5 continents in all. So it's a fairly global operation. And I suppose from our perspective, that's definitely added a layer of complexity to our payroll reporting. And as we continue to grow and expand, I think that is going to become more of an issue for us, but an issue that we have in hand, I think. So we've grown aggressively, I suppose, in the last couple of years through a lot of acquisitions as well, which, there's various integrations and they all have challenges. So I'll talk to you a little bit about them as we go through a few questions that you have there, Mary.
Okay. So Ronan, we know that you're a global leader and you recognize that global reporting is strategic in your organization. So what do you deliver to your stakeholders today? And how do you use that to tell the story of what's happening today in your organization to the different leaders? So are you breaking things down at the global level, or are you bringing it all the way down to the micro level?
A combination of both, Mary. So I suppose the first thing to do there, I suppose, is to define our stakeholders from a payroll perspective. So I suppose number one, and probably most importantly, we have the employee itself. So they have a fair expectation that their payroll, pension contributions and taxes will all be processed correctly. They need to have faith in their payslips. Number two, I suppose, is the local government authorities. We need to ensure full compliance in each jurisdiction, or I suppose face the costly consequences. So all of our filings must be submitted timely and accurately. Then within the organisation itself, we've stakeholder number 3, the C-suite. So I suppose the C-suite aren't interested in the complexities of payroll in different countries. They've enough complexities to be worrying about. But they do expect to see reporting on fully loaded consolidated payroll costs broken down by departments in a constant currency. So international boundaries from a functional and payroll reporting perspective are essentially a thing of the past. So I suppose departments in most software companies nowadays are international. So that definitely adds a layer of complexity to our reporting. Our stakeholder number 4 then would be department heads. So they want to see the fully loaded costs for their specific departments broken down to a team level. So I suppose the C-suite want to see the global level and the departmental level. The department heads want to see it on a team level and, when required, down to an individual level. But of course, that all needs to be done in a GDPR compliant manner. So typically our reporting will not reveal individual pay details unless specifically requested. But I suppose the way I'd compare our payroll reporting is it's like a helicopter view. So I suppose for the C-suite, they see it from above, and we slowly get closer to the ground and closer to the details. So that's kind of the way we operate it, and we only go into, I suppose, individuals' pay details on an as needed basis for confidentiality purposes.
Okay. Ronan, I like the fact that you brought into there's no borders, so we are very global. So the ability to get information on a certain area, let's say software engineers or engineering, and they're working across the globe, that's really important for leaders to understand the cost in certain locations.
Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose that it's those it's having that data available enables the C-suite members to make their strategic decisions and say, right, well, look, we need to hire a person, but we're going to hire in this location for cost reasons, or we need somebody closer to us here, we're going to hire somebody locally. So all that data is absolutely critical for them when they're looking to come up with hiring plans and that kind of thing.
So we talked a little bit about the C-suite and the helicopter view looking down to look at their financial health. What are some of the reports that you're providing to the C-suite? And then how often are you providing those reports to your C-suite leaders?
So I suppose we would engage with them typically on a monthly basis. So we take payroll reports from our various different payroll platforms and add any accruals for annual bonuses, quarterly bonuses or commissions, etc., to get their fully loaded annualized costs for all employees. These costs are brought into our ERP system, which consolidates them to a single currency. And we would then review that with the C-suite and department heads. Our department heads they're assigned budgets at the start of the year and targeted exit run rates for the financial year, usually based on, say, margins or percentage of our recurring revenue or other such metrics. When we review them monthly, how they're tracking against these metrics, it's done for operating expenses as well as payroll expenses, so it covers the full picture. Mm-hmm. And I suppose critically, it's not just reviewed in a past tense either. It's very much we help them forecast the financial impacts of any headcount movements or any plans that they have that are coming. So, we'd work into it that if they've got some planned exits, if they've got some planned hires, if we try and build all that out for them so that they can, I suppose, make critical decisions so that they can hit their targets and the C-suite can, I suppose, direct the ship to where they need the business to go.
So with your reporting, you're helping to tell their story where they are today, and then the C-suite can see the financial health at a given moment or a given month to see where you are today. And do they have to make adjustments in the path that they're going to, or do business owners have to take a look at what's actually happening? Have they overhired? Do you have additional costs for things? And revenue wasn't expected. The number wasn't expected.
So I suppose we look at it against budget and against some of the metrics, and sometimes there are legitimate reasons for them being over that metric. And I suppose it's very much a case of if they're over their metric, they need to be able to justify it, the department heads, and quite often they're quite good at that. But similarly, what we'll often see is that they'll have savings versus them metrics early in the year, because when they were putting through their plans, they, I suppose, strategically front-loaded it, knowing that it wouldn't happen until the back end of the year. But once they're hitting their exit run rate, because I suppose with some of the SaaS companies nowadays, it can grow and change very, very quickly. So an annual budget can quickly become outdated. So we typically try to look at our exit run rate for the year as well. And try and plan towards that so that we have a good control of, I suppose, of our starting point for the next financial year.
Yeah, and we all know that the cost of employees as assets to the company, there's a cost to having employees, and the cost it's more than just the salary, it's all of the fringe benefits.
It's the fringe benefits and everything, yeah. So yeah. Anytime we're reporting, it's always the fully loaded costs. Now, there are some obviously variables within that you can only, when you're trying to do the forecasting, you can only forecast based on past data, but we do try and look at it from a fully loaded cost point of view, which varies from country to country. There's different employers' taxes, different pension legislations, various different things in different countries. So it's important that we manage to try and, I suppose, capture all of that, bringing it back to a single currency each time.
Mm-hmm. And so what advice do you have, Ronan, for global professionals that may be just starting out doing global reporting or kind of may already have some reporting? What advice would you have to start to tell their story? And what steps did you take when you joined AMCS in 2019?
The very start of 2019, yeah. And I suppose we've grown extensively since then. But any payroll professional starting out, I would I suppose at the very, very first step, I'd have a documented workflow for each monthly payroll or each payroll period. Particularly if you have a number of personnel feeding into the process, you need to be able to stand back and have a look at it and see where you're at with each payroll. So definitely a documented workflow. I think one of the important things is obviously an internally agreed hard deadlines for information being submitted for payroll processing. I think, there's a lot of people on here that are working in payroll, and I'm sure they're getting plenty of late requests. Can you include this in this month's payroll and that kind of thing? I think you need to be clear with your deadlines from the get-go, and try not to be too flexible with them. Try and adhere to them as strictly as you can. Payroll within our company, then it involves, I suppose, a strong overlap between finance and HR. I know some companies payroll sits within HR, other companies it sits within finance. I think, given the nature of payroll, it's very much a hybrid of the two. So I think a HCM that contains the single source of truth can be very helpful. I know Rory pointed it out in one of the earlier presentations that a good HCM system won't cover all pay elements, but I suppose I do think it can cover the core elements and the core details. And obviously there's always going to be a little bit that sits outside that. The HCM systems aren't designed to process payroll, so there's always going to be a little bit extra that we need to. But I think you can probably get your core details from a good HCM system, I think. And I suppose finally, in terms of the reporting, I suppose one of the challenges is that, the reporting you get from various different payroll softwares in across different regions can look very, very different and take on different formats. So if you can try and keep your output reports in similar formats across regions, it makes it, I think, a lot easier when you're trying to analyze it and drill down into certain details.
And in this morning's session, we talked a lot about technology and looking out there to see, is there technology that can drive all of these items together so that you have the ability to have reporting and visibility into single views. The payroll landscape has changed quite a bit, so it's something that as payroll professionals, it is important for us to do our due diligence to look at what's going on in what vendors are providing and services. The automation and robotics was mentioned earlier today that can also be used in reporting, which is something that's very important. Now, Ronan, you mentioned mergers and acquisitions. And so how do you use reporting to help in your mergers and acquisitions situation to be a key leader for your organization?
So with mergers and acquisitions, I suppose there's always going to be an element of centralization whenever there's a merger or an acquisition. So you kind of have to factor that in as part of your due diligence prior to the acquisition. But I think the first thing we need to do is liaise with HR and try and get them contractually moved over to one of our existing entities if we have an entity within that country. If not, I suppose we need to find a payroll solution that works and fits into our overall payroll solution, which I think we've pretty much done for any of the acquisitions we've done lately. So I think it can vary depending on whether you have an entity in that country already where you've acquired the company, or if you're starting from scratch in that country. It can be a little bit more complex, I think.
So for your stakeholders, what are some of the key reports that they're asking you for, Ronan, besides the C-suite on the benefit side or the HR? What are some of the things that they're looking for you to provide once payroll's done, or the information that they don't have available to them to make key decisions?
I suppose it can vary from department to department. So I know our support team, we have to have members of support on 24/7 basically. So there's a lot of overtime work. A lot of people work weekends and they get paid additional for that. And I know that department are they like to look at their the cost of their overtime, because if they have a whole load of people doing overtime, it might mask the fact that they're under-resourced and they might need additional resources to fill that gap. So that's another report that specific department would look for. But it can vary from department to department, and what we're looking at, another company might be looking at a different metric, but that's definitely one that sticks out.
Okay, and we talked a little bit earlier this morning about the number of vendors and what you need and services from your vendors. In the reporting area, what do you think you should do for RFP? What are some of the suggestions or things that you would recommend for people if they're out looking for vendors, what they should be looking at, and some things they should be asking their providers?
So I suppose you need to, first of all, feel comfortable with any new vendor you're taking on. I would probably put down their responsiveness to you as one of the key issues when establishing a relationship with any new vendor, whether it be payroll or otherwise. But probably, I suppose the reporting that they can give to you, that you should be able to consolidate that and roll it up into your reporting structure. So you kind of need to see what their reporting suite is that comes out of their system. And I think a lot of payroll systems are relatively similar, but in some countries it can be quite different. So something that works for you whilst also being, secure, and what most employees what a lot of employees are looking for now is a self-service portal where they can go in and access their pay slips digitally. I think we took over one company and they were still receiving their pay slips physically, which I thought was a thing of the past a few years ago, but obviously it's still going on. But somewhere where they can access their pay slips digitally and it can be stored there, that makes the employee experience that little bit easier, I think is kind of one of the critical things as well.
I think, yes, I think you're right on at that, Ronan, to think about what that employee experience is. That's a piece of reporting. That's one of the stakeholders that you need to support. And definitely that saves time if they're able to access the information timely and they have access to getting that information. What I've also seen with some RFPs is really taking the reports that you need to have, talking with your potential provider or services, and having them show you, can they produce that report? We talked a lot this morning about real time. So there were some statistics about how we get the reports today. Do we have to have the vendor produce the report for us that we need, or can we produce that real time? Because we know as the data moves through its process, it has to be real time, because it has no value to us if it's 2 or 3 days old, especially if we look at things like overtime, right? That's key to an organization, to get real-time information for that and to be able to tell the story, because you never know when somebody's going to ask that question. Sometimes the questions come from senior leaders and we don't know why, but then before you know it, you may find out that you've just acquired a group of employees in France. They may be asking you questions on what is the cost of benefits in France, the fringe benefit piece. So it's important that you have that ability to provide the information, to tell the story. And then I would say real time, because sometimes on RFP questions, and it's easy to ask the question, do you have reporting? And it's easy to say yes, because of course they have reporting. But what is it that you need in your organization? And I look at things like being able to slice the data, whatever level you need it, from the global level at the most macro point, all the way down to the employee. So I'm meeting the needs of the C-suite, meeting the needs of, in your organization, you have your business departments with no borders, right? So we're able to give them all of their information. And then, of course, down to, there is reporting that the employee may need some information on. Can we provide that employee some information? So making sure that you have that. And in a world with no borders and no countries, that we're all over the world, we have to bring it to a common currency to be able to see what the value of our organization is and do financial health with that. So I think those are important.
Absolutely, and the real-time info piece as well. Like I suppose with modern technology, we've all become very impatient. We expect to have whatever we're looking for at the click of a button, and the C-suite can often be like that as well. So you need to have close access to the data that you can pull at any time to I suppose fulfill that. That's quite critical, I think.
In your organization, does the C-suite ask for information more than once a month, or are they ad hoc asking for reports?
I suppose it can be ad hoc. but typically it is reviewed on a monthly basis quite closely, and if they have a query, they'll probably come based on that review, but it can be ad hoc throughout the month as well, so they constantly keep you on your toes.
Was the reporting structure set up when you got there, or what have you done to enhance that reporting structure?
So I suppose before I started, there wasn't an in-depth monthly review with the department heads, but yet they were being held accountable for, to meet certain targets. So I think, the monthly reviews give them a better idea of their expenses and their outgoings, both from a payroll and operating expenses point of view. So I think that's probably benefited them. You can't expect them to keep the show on the road without the correct data to help them make decisions for their department. So I suppose that's probably the biggest thing is I've kind of enforced that monthly review with everybody.
Well, I think that's important. If they're being held to a budget, they need to know where they are in that budget, right?
And from a payroll perspective then as well, when I started, we would have had our payroll would have been done locally in the various different countries, and we've looked to centralize all of that so that we have the information and the data, real time. So I suppose when I started, if we were looking for information, we'd have to contact somebody in Australia or New Zealand for our payrolls down there, and it could be 24 hours later before you get the information back. Whereas now that it's all centralized and everything, it makes the whole process that little bit easier.
Well, and I know that you've also worked with your HR teams. There's some things that are important for them to be able to have that they don't have in their system. So you've used some of the payroll technology that you're using to support them, along with, I think it's really important what you've done. You have bonus potential. So you have the amount the employee has the potential either in percent or amount to earn in the year. So that that really does pull some great data for.
It does. It helps us with with our forecasting. We'd accrue that obviously on a monthly basis, and it's smoothed across the year. But from a payroll perspective, the cost is all in 1 month. So, we need to be able to factor that in when employees are looking when the C-suite are looking at the data. We need to be able to I suppose smooth that out. That'll be critical for them.
No, I think it's critical, and you definitely entering in AMCS and recognizing as a global leader that how can they make decisions if they didn't have the information. So taking that first step to build out the reports, provide them that information. I know because we've had discussions that you've added more into that reporting that helps to make the C-suite and the business owner of that particular group understand what their costs are. And especially if we're accountable to a budget and we need to look at that or make adjustments for that, it is important to be able to measure that and do metrics on that information so that the C-suite has the financial health of the organization in any moment of time. So I think you've done a really good job to tell your story in your organization. But of course, you've recognized all of the leaders in your organization, their business needs.
Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose that there's plenty, there's always, we're constantly looking for areas to improve on, and something that we probably don't do enough of is just take a step back every now and again and see what we can standardize across regions. There's plenty that you can standardize, but there's always areas that you can target, definitely. So, it's continuous improvement, I think, is what all of us here are striving for in the payroll journey.
Yes, and I think the message, I think that you have important information, so share it out. If you're not doing it today, start small. Talk to your stakeholders, as Ronan gave us insight to the different stakeholders that he's working with in his organization. Of course, the key stakeholder is our partners in HR. We have information they may not be aware that we even have, depending on what they're actually supporting and the business needs. And I always like to. Ronan works in finance. I've worked in finance and HR, but my finance friends, I have a lot of information I can share. So why don't we share that with the organization? So it's important to contribute. We're hired to help the organization. So let's get our story out. You guys are valuable. You're essential. So I want to thank you for joining us today. If you want to reach out to Ronan or myself, we're both on LinkedIn. So we'd be welcome to hear from you. And if you need any additional information, I'm happy to assist you.
Thank you so much. That was such a great talk. So much information there, really fantastic. So thank you so much for your time, Mary and Ronan. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So guys, thank you, Ronan, sorry. Over talking you. So thank you. As I said, we have our last session, the power of the payroll profession. We've got 3 great speakers and really inspirational payroll professionals talking about, you know, where payroll is now, you know, what lessons we've learned and what the future holds. So we're just going to stop this session now, and then we'll go straight to the next session. So I hope you can join us. So thanks a lot. And again, if you need to speak to Mary and Ronan, they're going to be staying online. You can direct message them and have a chat with them if you need to. So thanks once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.